Okay, this session we will be covering setting up your fiscal or financial year. We'll be looking at setting up a transaction date password, setting up users and roles, creating bank accounts and entering opening balances. So we are going to be looking at two methods of entering opening balances for bank accounts. One is by creating a general journal, and the second is by entering it while creating the account, and QuickBooks passes the journal in the background. We're going to look at creating a budget as per the Ministry of Education sample budget, which you have created a chart of account for in the previous session. So this session we'll be creating the budget using those line items that were created. We are going to be looking at creating a budget by class. So this can be by departments, different departments, or units, or it could even be different locations, because I know some institutions may have multiple locations, especially colleges. College may have a main campus and another campus. High schools may not have multiple locations, but they will have different departments, such as the canteen, tuck shop, agricultural project, and so forth. And in terms of department, you can actually have a budget for each academic department, such as the mathematics department, social studies department, English department, and so on. Okay, so let's get started. Up your fiscal or financial year. That's the first thing we're going to look at. Setting up your financial year is very important because this has implications for creating your reports, and it also has implications for preparing your budget. So it is very important that the financial year is set up in QuickBooks before you start doing anything, especially doing a budget. Alright, so to set up your financial year, now I know that schools are basically running 2 financial years, and so it is recommended that if you are running 2 financial year, that is April to March 31st and September to August 31st, it is recommended that you create 2 QuickBooks company files, because one QuickBooks company file will not allow you to have 2 fiscal years. So that's very important. So to create a fiscal year, we're going to go to company and we're going to go to my company. Once you go to company, there is a pencil icon right here to the right. It is the edit button. What you're going to be doing is to edit this information that is here. So we're going to now go to report information. As I said, your fiscal year has implications for your reports or for your reporting, and budget is tied into reporting, right? Your chart of accounts is tied into reporting, so it's important that the fiscal year is correct. All right, by default QuickBooks will have your fiscal year set to January. So once you open the system, your fiscal year will be defaulted to January. Right? Most companies, their fiscal year is January to December. The tax year, on the other hand, is also, in most jurisdictions, January to December. Schools may not be taxable for all the taxes, but statutory taxes would apply. Alright, so we are going to change the fiscal year, and we are going to be working with September, which will be the fiscal year for the school fees, I know the fiscal year for subvention accounts is different, which is April 1 to March 31st. So we're going to be using this one for demonstration purposes. We are using one file, and we're using the fiscal year September to August 31st. So you just need to select OK, and your fiscal year is now set. So we are now going to be looking at setting up a transaction date password in QuickBooks. A transaction date password is very important because this enables you, the QuickBooks user, to restrict data entry at a certain date, or as at a certain date. So we are going to be setting up transaction date password. So to set up your transaction date password, you will go to company and you will set closing date. Other accounting packages such as Peachtree and so on, now Sage 50, actually allows you to close a financial year, or to have the 2 most recent years open, but that will only give you like a protection for a year or for the past 2 years. That will only give you protection for dates that are more than 2 years old. But QuickBooks allows you to actually set a transaction date password at the end of a particular period. So if you are doing monthly reporting, as soon as your reports are generated, your bank accounts are reconciled, you can set a transaction date password to basically restrict other users from entering or changing information that is in the system, or the transactions that are entered. Alright, I went ahead and did this. Alright, so basically to set transaction date password, you want to exclude estimates, sales orders, and purchase order from the closing date restrictions. This means that if you had created an estimate, you can go back and edit it, because estimates really don't affect your financial information. Sales orders, purchase orders also do not affect your financial information. These are non-posting transactions. They do not create a journal entry behind the scenes where it can actually change your trial balance or change your other reports. So what QuickBooks will do whenever a user try to enter a transaction on or before the closing date, QuickBooks will require a password to be able to enter that transaction, which would mean that only the relevant persons would be able to make changes after reports are generated and accounts are reconciled. And what I get from a lot of users is that they have done their reconciliations, they have done their reports, and 3 months down the line, they cannot seem to figure out why their cash book has a different balance and their reconciliation has a different opening balance. Right? Their reports have different balances. This would most likely be because somebody has gone, it could be erroneously, and change a transaction, delete a transaction. So persons are going to be sitting there thinking that there is a ghost in QuickBooks. But there is no ghost in QuickBooks. Alright, so I've had those situations where persons printed document and say, well, this is what I printed from the system 3 months ago for the recon statement. This is my balance sheet. This is my cash book. And now it has changed. So what I normally would do is to go through the audit trail, and in going through the audit trail, I would basically point out the change, transaction, the user who effected the change, and point that out to the user. So to set the closing date, you will click on the date picker icon there, and we're basically going to set the date to the 30th of August. And the reason for doing this is because we want to be able to enter our unpresented checks as at the 31st of August. So we want to allow that 1 day for those entries. Right, so if we do the restriction up to the 31st, we'll not be able to enter our unpresented checks after we have entered our bank account. And our unpresented checks are necessary to be able to get our first recon done in QuickBooks. So we need to enter transactions on that day, opening transactions. And it's not just unpresented checks, there may be also some opening entries that need to be entered on that day. So we're going to set it for the 30th of August So what this means is that there will be no transactions entered on or before the 30th. The system will restrict it. Alright, so now we're going to set our transaction date password. Try to make your password very secure. So you enter your transaction date password here and you confirm the password. To ensure that you enter the correct thing, you can click on show so you know that you have entered what you want to enter. What you can do, you can take a screenshot of this, or you can write it down in a safe place where you are the only person would have had access to this. Alright, I'm not saying that you should make this your transaction date password. This is just an example of how secure you should make your password. Okay, so once we have set our transaction date password, or our closing date password, we can select OK. And the system will prompt you if you don't have an admin password. Because if you don't have an administrator password set, it means that by default the password for admin is blank. So if a user goes open QuickBooks and types in admin and click OK, they will go right into the file, and that user can come to this area of the system and view the transaction date password and will be able to make changes before the transaction date, or before the date through which the books are closed. So it's important that an administrator password is created, and it is also important that each user in the system, or each user who is going to be using the system, has their own password set up. So we'll be adding users in a short while. So now we're going to be looking at setting up users and roles. So to set up users in QuickBooks, you will need to go to company, and you're going to go to set up users and password, and click on set up users. But before we do so, we need to change the admin password. As I pointed out the weakness with the admin password being blank earlier and the risk it poses to your data, it's best you change your admin password as soon as you create your QuickBooks company file. So you can click change your password, and QuickBooks requires a complex password. Therefore, it should have at least 7 characters, including 1 number and 1 uppercase letter. Alright, so we're going to enter in a password for the admin. I'm not saying that you should make this your password. I'm just demonstrating a creative way you can generate a password that is easy to remember, because here I'm using P at $ W 0 RD exclamation mark 23, which would be password 123, and you click on confirm. So you have met all the requirements in terms of the password complexity of QuickBooks. So now that we have created the admin password, we need to add users and set up their passwords. So go to company, set up users and passwords. Can set up users. To set up a user, you will need to enter the administrator password, and we have just created that password. We're going to enter it. Okay, and add a user. Let's say we want to add another user to the system. We already have a user, John Brown. So let's say we want to add Mary Jane. So M Jane. And we're gonna enter a password for Mary Jane. But let's say she is the receivables person. Then you may not want to give her access to all areas of QuickBooks. Right, so you're going to give her selected areas, so she'll be able to access selected areas of QuickBooks. You're going to select next, and she's a her job description requires that she performs receivables functions, so she would get full access to receivables. And we're going to click next. Where purchases and accounts payables are concerned, she does not need to have access, so we're going to keep it at no access. And where checking and credit cards are concerned, that is not relevant to the schools, because this is only if you are using QuickBooks to process the cards, and this is not relevant to the schools, neither for this training, so we're not going to look at that. So no access. Time tracking is also irrelevant, so no access. Payroll and employees, no access. Sensitive accounting information, this should be restricted as well, so no access, because this here allows the user to perform activities such as transfer funds between accounts, make general journal entries, and do online banking. So this is something that a bursar would be doing, and not a entry level person in the bursar department. So next, sensitive financial reporting would also be an accountant or bursar function, or bursar's function, so no access. Alright, QuickBooks allows you to restrict changing or deleting transaction even in the current period. So you can set the system where if a user post a transaction, even if they just posted it a short while ago and they need to make a change to it or they need to delete it, it would have to be done by an admin. Well, that is really implementing very strong controls, but you have to balance the controls that you put in with productivity. So it depends on your environment. You can choose to enable this or not. So if you want a user to be able to post a transaction, they made an error, put it to the wrong account and realize they need to change it. And this has nothing to do with transaction date or cutoff date that we discussed earlier. This is just a user maybe receiving a payment and they received it to the wrong bank account and they need to go in and change it. In this case, you want to give the user the ability to go in and change it. So you would select yes if that is what you want to do. If you want to basically be in total control as the accounting person for the institutions, you can select no. If you have selected no, what this would mean is that this person will not be able to, this user will not be able to change the transaction that they are created. And once you select this, you notice that the closing date has been grayed out, because if you are using this option, then you may not need to use the closing date option, because they basically do the same thing. It's just that this restriction is a tighter restriction than the closing date restriction. So we're going to select yes. So you have to balance productivity with proper internal controls, because the key to setting up users is to only limit users to their job description. You're only going to give users enough access to perform their daily duties on the system. So you are basically going to restrict everything else on the system. So there are no loopholes in the system. Your books are cleaner because, I mean, the user won't have access to areas where they may in error delete something, create a transaction that was not supposed to be created, and that kind of thing. So it is important that it is restricted. So here we have a summary of what this user would be able to do, and the only thing that they have access to is for accounts receivables, sales and accounts receivables. And you have 3 columns. You have create, print, and reports. So a Y mean that they have access and an N mean that they do not have access. So this user can create sales and accounts receivable transactions. This user can print the transactions, and this user can view the reports.